So by now I think we're all familiar with Jared Leto. You know, this guy. And maybe recognize him better as this guy. No? This guy, surely. I'm going to keep saying this name wrong. I've been pronouncing it Gerard Leto for my whole life, but apparently it's pronounced Jared Leto. So I've used the two interchangeably. Whenever I remember to pronounce it right, I'm going to pronounce it right. Okay, right. He's a singer for a band and also does some acting, right? So we've all seen him well, I say we've all seen him in Suicide Squad. Maybe you spared yourself that. He's also a singer. When I was younger, I used to listen to a lot of emo-y kind of stuff and was into the music, right? Turns out, people are saying he's started a cult. Before I jump into this, how's your quarantine going? I hope you're all keeping safe and keeping your mental health in check and like exercising a little bit and, you know, doing all the things you need to do. How's my quarantine going, I hear you ask? You might notice that my voice is a little bit iffy. That's because yesterday I screamed twice at the top of my lungs. That's how my quarantine's going. Back to Jared Leto. Back to Jared Leto. So essentially, for a number of years, he and I believe one other band member who I think is his cousin or something like that, they're related, were running something called Camp Mars. And Camp Mars is, as far as I understand it, like a camp, like a festival kind of thing that happened once a year, where they went and they were outdoors for a bit and they did a bunch of activities and then the band performed for them and they did all sorts of stuff. And recently that has become Mars Island, which is effectively the same thing, but I would say on possibly a larger scale, or it's on an island. Some of the details are a little bit fuzzy, and as ever, I'm just doing the best with what information I've been able to gather. Please do your own research on this, make up your own mind about what you think this is. Also, just to be clear, not an expert on cults. If you're new here and you're not familiar with that, I'm not an expert on cults. I just make videos on destructive cults, damaging norms, and just generally bad ideas. I'm an interested party. Please make your own mind up about everything that you see on my channel. There's been a few articles talking about this being a cult. Mars Island and Jared, there's another fly in the room. There's always a fly in the room. Jared Leto tweeted a bunch of pictures from Mars Island saying yes, it's a cult, and the pictures do look very cult-like, at least if you don't know very much about cults, and in your mind a cult is that thing where everyone dresses the same and they all kind of follow the leader around like they're Jesus and that kind of thing, then this is going to look like a cult on face value. And of course they're saying yes, it's a cult, so I think people could be forgiven for thinking it is a cult. But before I would be happy to call anything a cult, I would want to look at it a little bit more closely. I would want to check out the bite model and see if anything that they're doing matches up on the bite model and things like that. So when I first saw the white clothes in the pictures, my initial thought was this looks like it's like deliberately for the sake of the photos. Like, it's possible that they are encouraged to wear these white clothes for the whole time, but without any evidence of that, my initial thought was it looks like it's probably just for a photo op, right? Just so that they could make this post later for promotional purposes. That was my thinking on that. So I wanted to investigate a little bit, and I wanted to see, is it the case that they're wearing white clothes for the whole of Mars Island, the Mars Island experience, or are they just doing it for one night for the sake of the photos? Are they encouraged to wear white when they're not at one of these getaways? And so I did a search on Instagram. I looked for the hashtags echelon, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but that is the term that's used to describe the 30 Seconds to Mars fandom. That's the band that Jared Leto is the frontman for. So they kind of blended, obviously, Mars Island, 30 Seconds to Mars, all this kind of thing is related to the band, and he is somewhat the central figure in that whole thing. Very much in the whole camp experience, in the whole island experience, it seems like the focal point is around the band, but I would say more him, more prominently being there, because he's not just the lead singer of the band, he's also the Joker, and he's also that guy from Fight Club. The hashtags I searched for were echelon, echelon family, yes it's a cult, and for those who understand, which are all related to 30 Seconds to Mars, the camp and all this kind of stuff. Yes it's a cult, and for those who understand, and the use of the word family, again, sounds very cult-like. I don't know whether that makes it a cult. I actually tweeted about this before and said, after I read the initial article, and I thought, in my mind, it needs more than just looking like a cult and calling itself a cult to be a cult. Like, especially if we're talking about destructive cults, you need more than that, I think. All of those hashtags seem to be related to the joke that it's a cult. The pictures, when you look for the echelon family, all that kind of stuff, I was looking for the family, right? The fans, the people who I was checking to see whether or not they were wearing white outside of these retreat things. But actually it turns out that basically all the pictures are just of Jared Leto. Like there's very little of the fans. There's a few of the fans, and overwhelmingly they weren't wearing white. Like it wasn't like everyone who was there was wearing white. There's a few people, but I would imagine not more than the regular, like, you know, amount that a person would wear. Right, what is happening with my mouth? The wearing white thing, which would be a bite model point if it was like if they were telling them what to wear all the time. I've been able to trace it back, I believe, to what is called White Night, which I don't know where it originates, like within the lore of the band and all that kind of stuff. But at the Camp Mars in 2015, I found a speech, like an opening speech kind of thing, that Jared gave to the people that were there, where he mentions White Night.
So tomorrow is White Night.
So he mentions that at the 2015 Camp Mars, not that Camp Mars, the other, this Camp Mars, the 30 Seconds to Mars Camp Mars. I've linked that video and all my other sources in the description that you can check out at the end of the video, by the way. So I believe that White Night is the night that everybody at the camp or on the island wears white. I don't know why they're doing that. I don't know if it's given any special meaning. I don't know if they're made to do that or whether it's just sort of encouraged as a fun thing, and if you don't do it, well, there's no consequences. Like maybe you'll be excluded from the photo op if you're not wearing white. I don't know. I would say that if they're kind of overtly told to wear white and the white thing is given some kind of special meaning, whether it's like ceremonial or symbolic or something like that, then that would lead a little bit more towards sort of culty, maybe, even if it is just for one night. However, obviously the idea is, with a cult, the idea tends to be to control people and everything they do all the time, pretty much, to a lesser or greater extent, in various aspects of a person's life. Come and say hi for a second, and then I'll put you down. So still on that video from Camp Mars in 2015, the guy that uploaded it in the comments, when asked, said that there were more guys than girls at the camp. He said that there was like 100 girls to like 10 guys or something like that. And at the same camp, Jared said this.
Everybody check out their rooms or their tents. Okay, make sure you leave your door unlocked. You never know who's gonna pay you a visit.
For me, that came across as a little bit concerning. Like, I know there's that whole thing about like, oh, rock stars sleeping with fans and all that kind of thing, and I don't know where I stand on that really. It did come across as a little bit creepy, that comment from Jared. Although I think that this was just after he's done the Joker and he's method acted it and stuff, and yeah, there's people in the comments saying, oh, you know, the Joker's still in him a little bit. I don't know if that's a defense for that though. I just feel like that is a very weird thing to do. This is the kind of thing that you kind of want to look at. The interactions between a leader and the followers say a lot, right? And whether this is a destructive cult, whether this is a constructive cult, whether this is fine, whether this is really just, you know, what it seems like it's supposed to be, which is just like a fun little getaway, and then there's some music and blah, 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 you know, like a festival kind of thing. Looking at the way that the person that all the affection or the attention is on interacts with the people that are looking up to them says a lot about the dynamic of the overall thing, I would say. When I'm looking at this kind of thing, the first thing I want to see is, you know, whether or not I can get hold of some kind of footage or just some sign of an interaction between the leader and their followers. So that's why I wanted to share this here today. Also, I don't know if you can hear, but Tam's in the litter box in the background, because why the hell not? I mean, every time I need there to not be a cat in the litter box, there's a cat in the litter box. Maybe the whole make sure you leave your doors unlocked thing came across a little bit more creepy just because he was doing it in his Joker voice. I don't know, but like for me that was a bit weird, and it gave me pause, so I thought it was worth including it. You can check out the video for yourself, as I say, see what you think. Overall, there is like a admiration for Jared Leto, which I think would happen in any kind of fandom. With if anyone's up on stage and they're rocking out, or they've made music that you like, or if they're in movies or whatever, then there's going to be that kind of like adoration, and they're going to have some influence over the following. That's just kind of what happens with this kind of thing. So really, we just hope that when it comes down to it, you know, these people are responsible with their influence. Obviously, that's not always the case, but you know, we would hope that the majority of people that get into these positions of influence use their influence properly, although in recent years we've found that maybe that's not always true. But the whole thing is like a cult of personality vibe. Like they're looking up to him, they're listening to what he's saying, they're adoring him. So if you look on the website for Mars Island, you'll see that tattoos are offered on there as well, for like as part of the package that you get when you come to Mars Island. And this isn't the first time we've heard of like permanent body markings in relation to cults. So obviously there's that question, is this a cult? We still haven't really answered that, and as I say, I'm going to let you draw your own conclusions on that one. But in terms of it being like a red flag for me, the idea of having like a permanent marking on your body related to something like this, so maybe that's not so bad if it's like a band or it's lyrics or something, but that would have to be your personal choice. If it's being encouraged by the band or by a leader, or if it's being forced on you, as has been the case with some permanent body markings in groups like this, then that would be a real concern. And if it is optional, then it's less of a trouble, but they are still offering it as, and I would say perhaps even encouraging it. So, take that as you will. As far as the bike model goes, there's no mention of like tattoos or anything like that on the bike model, but they do talk about clothing. I would say that tattoos, permanent bodily markings, that should be on the bike model, and if it's not on the bike model, then it would come under clothing, I would say, because it's changing the appearance in some way. If we're talking about tattoos and 30 Seconds to Mars, we can't ignore this whole thing that happened way back when they, I believe I read this on NME, and I, again, linked in the description. There was like a tattoo-related drama, right? So this is a quote from an NME article. The US band, fronted by actor Jared Leto, posted a message on their website on Tuesday, July 23rd, asking for help in making a lyric video for the song, one of their songs, which appears on the latest album, Love, Lust, Faith plus Dreams. Along with the request are a list of things fans must do in order to have their video qualify for consideration, including close-ups of the area tattooed before, during, and after the process. All fans must be filmed saying, "I am the echelon," before going under the needle, and must also explain why they're getting it done. Fans have criticised the band for their request, with many of the comments underneath the post describing the move as irresponsible. "I like the band, but I don't think this is a good idea at all," says one commenter, while another adds, "It's absolutely irresponsible and probably the worst thing Mars has ever done." I'll leave it up to you whether you think that is the worst thing Mars have ever done. I haven't listened to their new music, so I can't judge on that one. But so I think that encouraging your fans to get a tattoo just for your music video is somewhat of an overstepping. I think I would agree that it's irresponsible, to be honest. It feels like a display. It feels like a request for a display of dedication. It feels like, and maybe this is just me, like having read what I've read about cults and seen what I've seen about cults, seeing it through like that lens. I don't know, but it feels like a request for a display of dedication somewhat. And it's a weird thing to show off, just like people being so committed to you that they're marking their bodies. I say forever, like obviously you can get them removed these days, but that's not cheap. And so for most people, it would be forever, right? I would say that this whole tattoo thing shows somewhat of a skewed sense of what's appropriate. That would be my judgment on that. Going back to the name of this album, Love, Lust, Faith plus Dreams, right? Dreams is an interesting one because I actually found this video this morning. I was watching it on YouTube of the description described it as this. It was Jared Leto after the Kenosha show. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but apparently people were brought into a what looks like a school room, like a class in a school, and he's got like a whiteboard up there, and he's like teaching them about how to make their dreams a reality, which, on the face of it is not too much of an issue. I would say overall the advice he gave was, it was a heap of platitudes. Like, it's that kind of thing. Like, you can make anything happen. You just got to hard work and you'll make it. And okay, so that's true, but that's the kind of advice you get from like an after school special, right? That's like, it just doesn't feel like very much, doesn't feel like very profound. But when he was doing that video, the symbol that he drew on the board was this triangle symbol with a line through it, which I've also seen associated to the band. Now, I don't know if this is all related to that album and that's all part of the symbology of the album. It's weird that he's rolling that out into somewhat of a larger mythology where he's trying to teach people things. And I would say from that, I would draw the conclusion that he likes to position himself somewhat as a teacher figure, which leans me more towards saying I would be concerned that if this isn't a cult, it might become one. That would be my thinking, at least on that. Another thing that is on, when you look at the things that are available for people, you go into like the higher packages and stuff. I'm not sure if this is available on the lower packages, but it's definitely available on the higher packages. Private yoga sessions. Now, I don't know if this is with Jared and Shannon, the family member of his that is also in the band, or if this is like on your own, like with a tutor, or whether you just like get given a room and a yoga mat and they're just like, go for it. I don't know. I think on the list of things where they're saying what's happening with the band, they've been pretty clear that it's happening with the band. So maybe this isn't happening with the band. Who knows? But I mean, yoga, it's not the first time that yoga has been used to take things further than they should go. So it could be happening. I don't know if it is. I've no indication of whether it is or not. I think that when someone says this is a cult, immediately certain other things come to mind, and this kind of a thing would come to mind when you've already labelled something a cult. So in my mind, that Jared or at least the 30 Seconds to Mars social media team have said, yes, this is a cult. It means that they now have to walk quite they're on thin ice with that. I think they have to walk a tightrope on that, because now that they've gone, yes, this is a cult, and they've alerted people to the prospect of perhaps it is a cult, even if it is a publicity stunt, which it may well be, then offering private yoga sessions and encouraging tattoos and things like that starts to get towards troubling a little bit. You know, I don't know enough to draw any conclusions right now, but even so, if the yoga sessions are with the band, that's potentially iffy, and if they're not, then I mean, whatever, it's fine, as long as the yoga instructor is doing their job properly. Fine. So one of the good things I found was that actually it doesn't seem like people are told they have to do everything on the schedule of Mars Island. Like it does seem to be like it's like a holiday thing. Like you do what you want to do. There's stuff available. You can do water sports if you want. You can do this drum circle with one of the band members, all that kind of stuff. They've got concerts and stuff. So there's kind of like, there's stuff that you can do, but you don't have to do it. And I think that's good. And in the 2015 speech clip that I showed you from Camp Mars, which is obviously the predecessor of Mars Island, he made it clear that people aren't expected to do everything activity-wise. He said, if you want to just sit and read a book. You know, he says, you work hard, this is, you know, time, whatever. So fine, you know, I think that's not too much of an issue. I think there's a lot of activities, and I don't know whether that's changed since Mars, like Camp Mars in 2015. Maybe they didn't have as many activities then, so it was more viable to say, yeah, just read a book, whereas now there's more stuff, so they're like, no, get stuck in. I don't know. But, you know, even if he is just saying get stuck in, that's not control. Really, with this, the it's a cult thing that you've seen by them, and then the people who have made articles about this talking about it, when you're someone who has looked at cults, and when you're someone who is interested in cults and has had some experience with cults, and you understand something like the bite model, or you've read Lifton and things like that, and then you come and look at something like this, certain things will flag up as potentially concerning. But to someone who hasn't read all that stuff or hasn't had that kind of an experience, this could just, that's a cult. They just look at it and they'll go, that's a cult. But actually maybe, I would say, but there is more to what a cult is than just it looking like a cult, I think. And that was my initial thought on this. And that continues to be the overarching feeling I have as I'm going through this. When I first saw this, I thought maybe it's a cult. And then I thought maybe it's a publicity stunt. And then I thought, if this goes on in the direction that it's going in, and that control is enforced, you know, there's some strange moments in throughout the whole thing, some images that look very much like you would see like Rajneesh Param kind of a thing, like the leader sitting up there dressed in all white and then the audience watching them. So if that keeps going in that kind of a direction, if it's going in the direction of Jared Leto thinks he's got something to teach people and he thinks everyone needs to listen and they need to do things his way, and he starts laying down the law a little bit, then yeah, it could become more cult-like, I would say, and lean towards being a cult. If it stops just being like a short thing and starts being a long-term thing, or like he lives on the island or whatever, and then people start coming to him for advice and stuff, or they start coming to live near him or with him, it would start to get a bit more concerning, I would say. Or even if he's running the kind of thing, and that's like the peak of it each year, and then throughout the year outside of that people are encouraged to dress a certain way, act a certain way, and that kind of thing, then again it would lead more to being a cult. However, when you look at the video clips and stuff of him like dressed like Jesus and like sitting in front of people, then I understand why someone would look at that and go, that is a cult. And I don't know, maybe it is. This is the thing as well. As I mentioned before, you can only get so much information on this kind of thing from the outside, and it's only when people become disenfranchised, when people have a bad experience, or when people decide that it's not for them, or they're not interested, or they lose faith in the leader or whatever, and they start to come away and they start to tell their stories, that you realize actually what's going on inside. So right now we don't know whether this is a cult, I don't think, unless someone goes in and tries to figure out what's going on, or unless someone comes out and like talks about it. We don't know whether this is a cult or not. And it's easy to just say something is a cult because it looks like a cult, but I think what happens there when you do that is that you lose some of the nuance that using a word for a specific purpose grants you, if that makes sense. That's why when I hear people say, oh, all religions are cults, I'm like, no, there's a difference. And the reason there's a difference is that it enables us to describe one thing more specifically and another thing in another way. And that enables us to understand each thing better and communicate on each thing better. If I say Christianity is a cult, what I'm doing is I'm missing out on some really important nuance that distinguishes the average Christian church, which actually isn't a destructive or unsafe environment, from something a little bit more concerning that's actually using control tactics, actually fulfilling points on the bite model to an extreme degree, things like that, So there's some real important nuance there. So just calling something a cult, and even if you're doing it for a publicity stunt, which, as I say, this may well be, for me that's like trivializing this almost. It's almost like it's being trivialized. That would be my concern on that point. And him dressing like Jesus and stuff, I feel like maybe that's supposed to be like a joke, and like they're kind of playing it, but I don't get what the joke is. What's the joke? What's funny about this? I just don't know, especially when you are saying it's a cult. And let's be fair, if you're someone who has a little bit of an oversized ego, you're a little bit, too sure of yourself, and you're dressing up like Jesus, and you're saying it's a joke, maybe it's not completely a joke, especially if you're being followed by people who are all dressed in white as well. Like that looks a bit iffy then at that point. Maybe it is a joke, but I'm not sure why it would be funny if it was. I don't get it. Maybe it's just for those who understand. The 30 Seconds to Mars Twitter account calling this a cult also doesn't make it a cult, I don't think. Like, you can call anything a cult, but does that make it a cult? No. I think, in my opinion, it has to fulfill points on the bite model. And this, it looks like it might, but we don't know whether or not it does. And in some cases, it probably doesn't, So who knows really whether it's cult or a cult-like, or I would just say that this is one to be watched and could potentially be a cult in the future. But just because someone says that something's a cult doesn't mean it is a cult. Just because I say my cat is running a cult doesn't mean he is. Does it? Or does it? Check out the Cult of Ned merchandise in my merchandise store. Oh, fucking hell. Smooth as an otter's bottom. Anyway, overall, without a real glimpse inside the camp or the island or the retreat or whatever it is, I would say it's hard to draw any conclusions, as I've mentioned throughout the video. I think we would need more information to know whether it's a cult. And I would say that this is a really good opportunity to recognize the value of not just throwing the word cult around. I think it can be difficult to know what is a cult and what isn't a cult if you're not someone who has done some reading on it. And I would say that maybe this isn't even something that many people even know there's things to read on, like that, but there's plenty of stuff to check out. There's a link in the description to some resources that I would suggest you check out, a few books and things like that, that I would definitely encourage reading if you're interested in how this kind of thing works. Still, the prices, like the tattoos, the clothing, the private yoga, which may or may not be with the band. If you check out the schedule for the thing, then there's like late nights and early mornings as well. So if people were expected to do all the activities at this thing, then they would be pretty tired because it's kind of late night and early mornings as well. So that considered with the prices, the tattoos, the white night, the white clothing, and whether or not there's any significance to that, you know, any symbolic relevance to that. The private yoga, whether or not it's with them. There's so many question marks here, right? All of those stand out as iffy to me in one way or another, or potentially iffy to me in one way or another. However, who knows? We don't know. And until someone who's experienced it has had a proper conversation about this, it would be difficult to discern anything. So I would say, if you're running a website and you're being like, oh, it's a cult, maybe do some more research on what cults are before you jump onto the bandwagon of calling it a cult and stuff. As I say, it is possible that this is them kind of playing into the increasing awareness of cults in the world in order to, you know, a little bit of a publicity stunt, that kind of thing. That's possible, it's possible. Of course, it actually being a cult and then saying it's a cult, like as a joke, they're not mutually exclusive, and it could be the case that a cult that is legitimately a cult is saying it's a cult as a joke to distract from the fact that it actually is a cult. That's possible too. So yeah, at this point, as I've said throughout the video, we don't really know. Maybe there's some other stuff I haven't been able to dig up. If you have any more information, feel free to put me onto it. I'd be interested in checking that out and going a little bit deeper on this. This is what I've been able to find in my research this time. But you let me know in the description below. Do you think this is a cult? Do you think this is just a band going maybe a bit too far and trying to get a bit of money? What do you think this is? Videos like this are made possible by my wonderful patrons, whom you will see listed at the end of the video on the end card. If you want to help support the channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. You can get a link to that in the description in the Premiere chat. If you enjoyed the video today, please hit like and subscribe to the channel to see more videos on destructive cults, damaging norms, and just generally bad ideas. I'm Andy Fellows, by the way, in case you hadn't picked that one up from the channel name. And let me just end this video now by saying, please be kind and ask good questions. I'll see you in the next one.